Long before there were refrigerators, before there was pasteurization, even before humans understood what microbes were, we were harnessing their invisible power. The most miraculous food transformation in human history wasn't discovered in a lab. Dear viewer, it was an accident. Imagine, ancient humans watching in horror as their precious food supplies began to bubble, fizz, and transform. Was it ruined, poisoned, or something extraordinary? Let's wind the clock back to when our ancestors first stumbled upon the accidental alchemy that would change the course of culinary history forever. Fermentation, my curious apprentice, is perhaps humanity's oldest form of food preservation. It's a curious dance between mankind and microbes that began long before we could see our microscopic partners. Chinese records from 7000 BCE describe the bubbling transformation of rice, honey, and fruit into intoxicating beverages. But why did our ancestors begin this bacterial partnership? You see, when early agricultural societies finally produced food surpluses, they faced a vexing problem: how to preserve this bounty through harsh winters or scorching summers. Nature provided the answer in the most unlikely form: beneficial bacteria and yeasts. Take this humble cabbage. On its own, a simple vegetable. But slice it, add salt, and allow time to work its magic, and you have sauerkraut, a tangy probiotic powerhouse that Vikings carried on long sea voyages to prevent scurvy. Yes, those fearsome warriors conquered the seas with barrels of fermented cabbage. In the culinary annals of history, fermentation wasn't just preservation, it was transformation. Across every continent, every culture discovered their own fermentation methods, often independently and always ingeniously. Consider cheese. Milk's leap toward immortality. Around 8000 BCE, desert travelers carried milk in bags made from animal stomachs. The enzymes from these stomachs, combined with the desert heat, transformed liquid milk into solid curds and liquid whey. Can you imagine their surprise, their bewilderment, their courage in tasting this strange transformed substance? And yet, this happy accident spread across cultures, developing into thousands of varieties we cherish today. In East Asia, particularly Japan and China, the humble soybean underwent its own remarkable metamorphosis. Through koji, a magnificent mold, soybeans transformed into miso, soy sauce, and tempeh. This isn't just dinner, dear viewer, it's drama. A simple legume, through fermentation, became the cornerstone of culinary traditions spanning millennia. And speaking of drama, let's talk about garum, the fermented fish sauce, so beloved by ancient Romans that merchants became wealthier than senators by trading it. Similar fish fermentations appeared independently in Southeast Asia, showing humanity's universal discovery of umami through fermentation. But perhaps no fermented food tells a more human story than bread. This sourdough starter, a symbiotic colony of yeast and bacteria, mirrors human migration patterns throughout history. As we traveled, so did our sourdough cultures, adapting to local microbes and creating distinctive regional breads. Taste, dear viewer, is memory in disguise. And fermentation is history's flavor preserved. Now, have you ever considered that human civilization itself might owe its existence to fermentation? The anthropologist Patrick McGovern proposes that beer, not bread, may have motivated our ancestors to abandon nomadic lifestyles and settle into agricultural communities. Imagine, 12,000 years ago, communities gathering around fermented beverages, sharing stories, strengthening social bonds. Fermentation wasn't just preserving food, it was preserving culture, tradition, and human connection. It all began with a whisper and a wild microbial party. For thousands of years, humans fermented foods without understanding the science. It wasn't until the 1850s when Louis Pasteur finally proved that living microorganisms cause fermentation, not spontaneous chemical reactions as previously believed. But fermentation wasn't just shaping local cuisines, it was connecting them. Fermented foods traveled remarkably well, becoming valuable trade commodities. Korean kimchi crossed oceans. African fermented grains reached the Americas. European cheeses traversed continents. In the culinary annals of survival, fermentation frequently meant the difference between life and death. During harsh winters in pre-industrial Korea, kimchi preserved in earthenware pots buried underground provided vital nutrition when fresh vegetables were impossible to obtain. The miraculous alchemy of fermentation transforms not just flavors, but nutrition. Many fermented foods contain significantly more vitamins than their unfermented counterparts. Sauerkraut contains dramatically more vitamin C than raw cabbage. Fermented dairy makes calcium more bioavailable. These microscopic alchemists, bacteria, yeasts, and molds, pre-digest our foods, breaking down complex compounds into simpler, more digestible forms. They neutralize anti-nutrients that would otherwise prevent mineral absorption. They're tiny chefs, preparing food for our optimal benefit. And here's where our story takes an unexpected turn. In our modern era of refrigeration and preservation technology, one might expect fermentation to fade into culinary antiquity, yet precisely the opposite has occurred. From Copenhagen's Noma restaurant experimenting with hundreds of fermentation projects, to the Korean kimchi refrigerator becoming a must-have kitchen appliance, to the sourdough obsession during pandemic lockdowns, fermentation is experiencing a remarkable renaissance. Why? Because in our sterile, modern world, we've begun to recognize what our ancestors knew instinctively. These living foods connect us to nature's cycles, to traditional wisdom, and potentially to better health. Modern science is rediscovering what traditional cultures preserved through practice. The mysterious relationship between gut microbes and overall health. The living microorganisms in fermented foods may help diversify our gut microbiome, potentially affecting everything from digestion to mental health. From Korean kimchi to Icelandic skyr, Ethiopian injera to Indian idli, Russian kvass to Mexican pulque, these foods tell the story of human ingenuity, of our remarkable ability to collaborate with nature's most microscopic inhabitants to create not just sustenance, but culture. Funny thing about food, it always tells the truth, even when history forgets. These fermented treasures are living time capsules, microbial messengers connecting us to our ancestors' discoveries. But there's a darker chapter in fermentation's story that few discuss. Some fermented foods were once used for more than nourishment or preservation. In certain ancient cultures, they were tools of power, items of worship, even weapons of war. Take this peculiar vessel discovered in an unmarked tomb near the Zagros Mountains. Analysis revealed traces of a fermented beverage unlike any known today, containing compounds that would have induced states of consciousness we can scarcely imagine. What if some knowledge of fermentation was deliberately lost to history? What if certain traditions were too powerful, too dangerous to preserve? Next time, we'll explore the forgotten fermentations, the mysterious brews and cultures that disappeared from our culinary heritage, and why some perhaps deserve to be lost. Remember, in the world of fermentation, time isn't just an ingredient, it's the master alchemist. And some transformations, once begun, cannot be undone. Every bite has a backstory.